Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Dearborn, Michigan, May 13th, 2022. Dearborn, Michigan is a city of over 100,000 people. It's just south of Detroit. In fact, the two cities share contiguous city limits. Of the population, 88% identifies as white. Interestingly, 54% of the population identifies as Arab. That is, they claim ancestry from the Middle East and or Northern Africa. 4% of the population of Dearborn identifies as black, and they are also the majority of hate crimes victims as well. 2 years ago, there was an incident there when two black shoppers at Dearborn's Westbourne Market were accosted by a white man who began hurling racial slurs at them. The racist barrage continued until the black patrons felt they had to leave for their own safety. This racist man then followed the two shoppers out into the parking lot. As the black couple was walking to their car, the racist white man then got in his vehicle and attempted to hit them with it. He then got out of his car with a baseball bat and came towards his victims with the bat raised over his head. He continued screaming racial slurs at them during all this. This anti-black spectacle was witnessed by a number of patrons of the market. The two shoppers he was threatening were able to leave the scene of the violent encounter. And the racist thug also left, but not because he was stopping his race attack, but because he was pursuing them. This guy was actively going after them, just like George Zimmerman and a number of other killers have done. But afterwards, that's when the racist thug's friends got involved. I'm talking about the police. This incident happened on May 13th, 2022. The Westbourne Market has surveillance video, and there were witnesses to this crime, and yet for all that, the Dearborn police didn't see fit to apprehend this hate criminal until 5 days after the attack. This animal was allowed to remain on the loose for almost a week after his hate crime. By then, the criminal's identity had been established. He was 44-year-old Jason Lucas. The criminal still had the bat that he had used during his hate crime when the police arrested him. What that tells us, of course, is that this white supremacist degenerate clearly felt he wasn't going to be arrested. Now, why would he think that? Why would he think that he could do something like this, be recorded on video doing it, have witnesses who saw him do it, and then think that he could just go home and even hold on to the weapon he had used during the crime and act as if the police weren't coming for him? Why would he think that? Why would he be so brazen as to believe that he could commit a hate crime in broad daylight and wouldn't be punished? Genetic immunity from the law and protection from law enforcement. That's how. Because you won't be surprised to learn that this isn't Jason Lucas's first brush with the law. For those with racial privilege, it never is. This latest hate crime is actually his fourth offense. His fourth. Now, while it hasn't been revealed what exactly his prior crimes were, they must have been significant. I'll explain why in a moment. Now, how is it that these criminals don't get stopped at 3 strikes? Some criminals are allowed to remain at bat, pun intended, as long as they want. There's no 3 strikes for some offenders. Lucas was eventually arrested, and the Wayne County DA's office charged him with 4 counts of felonious assault and 2 counts of ethnic intimidation. He also faces a charge of habitual offender. Now, considering his criminal past and the nature of this offense, he should have been held without bond. And if he were black, that's what would have happened. But the same system that allowed him to commit 4 offenses without any real punishment was still hard at work to protect him, so the judge gave him a pitifully low $150,000 bond and let him go home so long as he wore a GPS monitor. That was 2 years ago, back in 2022 when this crime occurred. It's 2024 now, and they're only just now getting around to finally scheduling his trial, which is set to take place in March. So he's been allowed to remain on the loose all this time. A 4-time offender charged with 2 hate crimes and with 4 charges of assault. And after his prior crimes, they just let him stay on the street. You know, I'm really surprised that the prosecutor's office didn't offer him a sweetheart plea deal like they always do, and just let him off with probation or something, because it worked out well the last 4 times they did it, right? We see these racial ambushes happen all the time. White supremacists lurk and wait until they think they've spotted a soft target. They observe closely the black people who are there because they can never be sure when one of their would-be victims might actually be ready and able to protect themselves from these ambushes. We'll continue with the Moment of Truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down. or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready. And always carry your steel. Power tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. In this case, that race terrorist targeted those black people because he thought that he would be the only person there who was armed. They never try these dirtbag moves if they think that their intended targets are armed. These white supremacists don't just pop up somewhere. They've usually sat and watched for a while and began sizing people up. They make sure to try to find a target that they think is soft, where the people there are not going to be ready to protect themselves. They know what the consequences could be if they guessed wrong. They find out too late that they brought a bat to a gunfight, but that's only part of the reason I decided to make this the subject of today's crime report. As I mentioned earlier, Dearborn is a majority Arab city. Right now, you have black people like Mark Lamont Schill and Barbara Lee and others who are bending over backwards to protect Arabs in Gaza and to advocate for them. Schill gave a speech before the UN advocating for the Arabs in Palestine, and that cost him his little side hustle as a panelist for CNN. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus are being specifically singled out and targeted by AIPAC to be removed from office. So you have black people in high office and in media doing everything they can to protect Arabs in the Middle East at great cost to themselves. Meanwhile, you've got a city with the majority Arab population, and now it has an Arab mayor, and the police chief is also an Arab, judging by his Arabic-sounding name, and yet that same city with a 4% black population pulls over black motorists almost 50% of the time. Now, out of that 88% white population in Dearborn, 54% identify as Arab. That means that there's a huge amount of demographic overlap there. It means a lot of these people identifying as Arab also identify as white too, even though our white liberals on cable will tell you that they're people of color. We see the exact same thing from people from Latin America as well. These hate crimes keep happening because the perpetrators understand full well that they have the support, backing, and protection of the police, prosecutors, and the courts. They know the white media will ignore their crimes if they can, and try to justify them if burying the story doesn't work. In this case, you didn't hear about it until I just told you about it. That's how well the white media buried it. The pattern of prosecutors who refuse to bring hate crimes charges, even for the most egregious of crimes, and even then offering sweetheart plea deals to these criminals, they've gotten it down to a science. These hate criminals know exactly what to expect. They know that the DAs will offer them a nice sweetheart plea deal at some point, or if worse comes to worse, they know the racist judges will give them a slap on the wrist come sentencing time, no matter what the law says. Now, Joe Biden bragged about how his '94 crime bill made it where harsh punishments were easier to do under law, and yet for some reason when it comes to these white supremacists carrying out anti-black violence, they keep getting slaps on the wrist no matter what. And when I see a pattern of behavior that goes on for decades, without stopping or even so much as changing, that tells me this is not some anomaly or mistake. This is the system operating exactly the way the people running it want it to. They give these racists a revolving door because the system is meant to give maximum freedoms and lack of restrictions to those classified as white. And no matter how many prior offenses they commit, the judges never take that into account. They ignore it and just give them bail. To all you Republican shills in my comments who keep posting stupid stuff about black people needing to vote Republican, tell me, where's the GOP at to talk about criminals like this Jason Lucas creep? Where are they at to craft legislation meant to target criminals like this? Instead, the GOP complains nonstop about hate crime laws being on the books because they punish someone for being white, or so the conservatives say. When will the GOP begin running ads showing race terrorists like this Lucas person and telling the public there's something wrong with allowing them to remain on the loose and we need tougher laws to punish them? They don't do it. So for all you GOP plants in my comments section, consider this my roundabout way of saying we have no friends. That includes in the GOP. So since no one is going to protect black Americans, it falls to us to protect ourselves, and we can. Yes, we know that when we exercise our right to self-defense, these white supremacist cops will try to arrest and charge us for defending ourselves. Those kinds of illegal arrests and unconstitutional charges should be laughed out of court, but then you consider the judges are as racist as the police and DAs, so they actually dignify and even defend this blatant racial illegality. As black people, we have a right and an obligation to protect ourselves and others who we see being menaced or attacked. Racism is a group sport, but so is black self-defense. And it's no accident that this animal pulled this stunt where he did. These white supremacists have long been targeting black people at supermarkets in particular. A few years after Dylan Roof committed a mass murder at Mother Emanuel Church, another white supremacist, Gregory Bush, attempted to imitate him by going to a black church armed with guns. Now, in that case, the parishioners were ready for him. They locked the doors and refused to let him in. Having failed to carry out his primary plan of attack, he had a secondary plan. He went up the road to a Kroger supermarket and killed the first 2 black people he saw, and he would have killed more, except there was a black man there who was armed and returned fire. The white supremacist, now finding that the bullets were flying in the other direction, ran like the coward he is, but he was eventually captured and sentenced to life in prison. Peyton Gendron, the so-called Buffalo mass murderer, went to a supermarket as well, and he murdered 10 black people there. And just last year in Florida, another mass murderer, inspired by Ron DeSantis, killed 3 black people at a Dollar General store. So this is not a phenomenon. It's not a coincidence either. We have a clear, undeniable pattern. These white supremacists have been targeting grocery stores and convenience stores as soft targets. The white supremacists know that black people are law-abiding, unlike these race terrorists. So most black people are not going to be carrying protection because that's what peace-loving people do. These white supremacists feel that they can count on us not being ready to repel or put down a race attack. Well, it's time for us to change the calculus on that. Time for us to accept that these race attacks are being carried out by the state, and rather than hope that we won't be the next target, we instead have to be prepared if and when we are. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Learn the laws where you are. Make sure you're carrying protection. And the next time some white supremacist calls themselves carrying out an attack at a store, they may well find out that the only thing on sale that day is lead. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Philander Bryant, Eve, Nancy, Suleiman Alaji, and Michael Gilmore. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.